Hey there, nightmares and ghouls. It's been a while. Thank you for joining me. Tonight we have a story of grief, of sleepwalking, and above all, a story of a horrifying evil lurking beneath a small town, possibly not unlike the one that you might live in. It's a story that begins with a missing boy and ends in something far darker than anyone could have ever imagined. So dim the lights, get cozy, and let's step into the darkness together. This is The Bride of Mammon by Jazzyclams. My therapist, who also happens to be my priest, said I should write down what happened to me. He said it would help with my therapy and hopefully help me get to a place in my life where I can be self-dependent again. He also said that sharing my story with others could help me validate my feelings and help me to see what happened wasn't my fault. So I figured why not kill two birds with one stone and just tell it all here. For you to fully understand my story, I need to give you some background. My name is Grayson Miller, and I'm 25 years old. From the time I was about 17, I began sleepwalking. It had never been that bad. Mostly, I would just wake up standing in front of the fridge or in the bathroom. But sometime during my senior year of high school, I woke up outside on my front lawn. The town I live in is a small town in rural South Dakota, with a system of tunnels that run underneath the city. It mostly consists of smaller drainage tunnels, but where all these tunnels eventually meet up forms a single large tunnel. Okay, so this main tunnel spans about 2 miles in a single direction, and it's called the Sheep Tunnel. It was given the name because it used to be the tunnel that local farmers would use to bypass the town streets while transporting their sheep to and from the nearby mountains near Black Elk Peak. Nowadays, the Sheep Tunnel is filled with graffiti and trash, and the local teenagers and college students often visit this tunnel as a sort of test of courage. I can't lie. I myself had been there with friends on several occasions in my high school years for similar reasons. It's important to know that one of the unspoken rules of the tunnels is that you never visit by yourself. Not because the tunnels themselves are dangerous, but the people who are rumored to use them. When I was in high school, my younger brother Barry, he went missing when he was dared to walk the length of the Sheep's Tunnel alone. When Barry never showed up at the other end, his friends became worried and notified the police. Despite countless hours of searching, no one was able to find him. About 2 months after he was reported missing, a group of college students stumbled across his body. I was never told the details at the time, only that they had found my brother. Barry was found at the main entrance of the Sheep Tunnel, a couple yards back from the opening. He was completely dismembered. His body was positioned on a small wooden platform and decorated around a tall wooden stake coming up from the middle of the platform. Based on the color of the blood and the state his flesh was in, it was apparent that Barry was recently deceased. His head was removed from his neck and put into an incision just below the ribcage, so the face of his head jutted out, replacing his stomach. Sticking out from around his head were the small and large intestine, cut into strands as if they were vines dangling off a long-forgotten statue. His arms were taken from their sockets and inserted into different locations on his torso. Barry's right arm stuck out from his back and was positioned in a way that made it look as if his hand was receiving a gift. His left arm was inserted in a hole where the left trapezius should have been. The arm bent over his neck and came down in front of his chest. His left hand was positioned with the pointer finger, the middle finger, and the thumb all extended, pointing down towards the ground. Both legs were removed from the hip joint and were wrapped around his waist, as if they were some sort of belt. His feet were covered in blood. There was also a passage of sorts written on the wall next to the sculpture, and it read, "Verily I say unto thee, appeasal of our God in this mortal realm is nigh unto impossible to obtain. Yet through the might and dominion of Mammon, all things shall come to fruition according to his will. Behold, Mammon's wife." Law enforcement scoured the tunnels and surrounding areas for months, looking for any evidence or any clues as to who might have done this, but quickly, all leads ran cold. The Sheep Tunnel was permanently closed off, using rebar to gate off all of the entrances. Every so often, though, people still go missing from town, and it's always blamed on the sheep tunnel. Barry's funeral was held at the church that we attended. I sat next to my best friend Sawyer. Sawyer and I had been friends for as long as I can remember. Still, he struggled to find any words to console me, and I honestly didn't blame him. I remember Father Malcolm giving some sermon about how this town is festering in a demonic presence and that it needed to be cleansed. I don't really remember much else from the funeral. I really only remember how uncomfortable I felt and how inappropriate it seemed for Father Malcolm to be saying those things instead of giving some sort of blessing to Barry and my family. About a year had passed since the funeral. My parents said that they couldn't live in our house any longer with all the memories of Barry that were in it. Barry's life insurance money had eventually made its way to my parents, and with it, we moved to a nicer part of town and into a nicer home. I remember thinking it was strange how much money they had gotten from that policy. Sawyer and I had just graduated high school, and we were trying to figure out what to do to celebrate our graduation. We discussed various activities for our graduation celebration while sitting in the grass at a nearby park. We found ourselves talking about paranormal hotspots, one of our many shared interests. Why don't we just go to Deadwood? It's not far from here, and I've heard they got tons of haunted places, I said. Sawyer was less enthused.
Okay, yeah, but it's a major tourist spot. If we go somewhere haunted, I don't want to be dragged around by some tour guide. I hate that.
I nodded in agreement. I had the same reservations of going to a major tourist destination, and I too hated tour guides. I'd much rather explore an area for myself. I thought about it for a second, still wanting to plan something with the paranormal. Looking back on this conversation now, I wish I had never come up with the idea. What kind of brother and son would ever suggest something like I did? I hate myself for ever having the idea in the first place. Well, there's that new psychic. I heard they just opened up for business. Why don't we go there?
That could be cool, but that's not that big of a celebration. I want to do something a little more memorable,
Sawyer said, with his head resting on his hands. Fair, but what if we ask the psychic for some information about the tunnels? There's gotta be something paranormal in there. I felt Sawyer freeze, understanding what I was suggesting.
You want us to ask the psychic about Barry, your brother who was sacrificed to the devil? Grayson, why would you even bring that up? What the hell is wrong with you?
He started to get up from the grass. My stomach twisted and my face became flush. I understood why Sawyer reacted that way. What happened left us all scared. Nothing's wrong with me, and he wasn't sacrificed to the devil. That's just some rumor. My pride made me defensive. I paused and then continued. I want to find out what really happened to my brother. Wouldn't you want to know the same? There's gotta be someone who knows, and if the police were useless in figuring it out, maybe a psychic could help. Ever since the police told my family that the case ran cold, I haven't been able to sleep, Sawyer. Deep down, I knew that we both wanted to find justice for Barry, and I needed his help. Sawyer stared at me, uncertainty on his face.
I don't know. Just thinking about it makes me sick to my stomach. Barry was like a brother to me. I know he was actually your brother, but I just don't think I can mentally do that.
Sawyer started walking away. I felt down, but I understood where he was coming from. I didn't say anything as I watched him walk away. About a week had passed without any contact from Sawyer. I wanted his help, but I didn't want to force him to do something that he wasn't comfortable with. I was laying in my bed, lost in thought, when my phone rang, and it was Sawyer.
I want to find out what happened to Barry before he died. I know your family has been falling apart since his death, and I want to find justice for him. I owe it to both him and you.
I didn't know how to respond. I was relieved he would follow me down this tunnel. Thank you, Sawyer. I do too.
Tomorrow. Let's see the psychic tomorrow.
Sleep didn't come easily to me that night. My mind was running rampant with ideas and possibilities of what could come from meeting the psychic. My thoughts were split up into 3 parts. 1. I'm very skeptical of psychics. I think a lot of them are con artists who take advantage of people who believe in the supernatural and want some sort of connection with the great beyond. 2. There's a possibility that some psychics are real and actually have some sort of connection to the supernatural, or just more in tune with the spiritual side than other people. And I'm desperate for answers. 3. My own personal belief of ghosts or hauntings is that typically they just don't happen. On occasions, I believe certain places can hold dark spirits or evil energies, but one thing I believe wholeheartedly is that when you speak of the devil, he will come. The next day, I pulled up to Sawyer's house at the time we had agreed on. He came out to my car when he saw me pull up. "Are you sure you still want to do this?" I asked. Sawyer took a breath.
Yeah, I'm sure. I owe you and your family this much.
The psychic had opened up shop in a strip mall in Rapid City. It was only about a 30-minute drive from where we lived. On our way, we listened to music, mostly the Gorillaz. Luckily, the music helped break the tension between us, and we were able to joke and talk how we normally did. The time passed by quickly, and soon we were pulling up to the street the psychic shop was on. When we pulled into the parking lot of the plaza, there weren't any parking spots close to the psychic, but as we drove past it, we saw the name: Miss Scylla's Dark Arts Emporium.
Weird,
Sawyer whispered. We had to park on the other side of the parking lot. Sawyer and I got out of my car and began walking. We passed by a deli shop as a sheriff and deputy walked out. "Sheriff Nelson?" I asked. Sawyer looked over in surprise. "Oh, you're that Miller boy. Grayson, was it?" Sheriff Nelson responded. "Yeah, how have you been doing?" "I'm good. I'm just taking my lunch break," the sheriff laughed. He was a larger man, but he was kind. The sheriff and I had some small talk, and soon we continued on our way.
How do you know him?
Sawyer asked. He was one of the officers who worked on Barry's case. He helped a lot and led almost every single search effort into the tunnels. He's a good man. My family ended up growing really close to him. When we reached the Emporium, we saw a sign in the window that read, "Palm readings, tarot cards, and scrying." We walked in and a little bell chimed over the door. Somewhere in the back, an older woman called out, "I'll be there in just a minute." The first thing I noticed about this place was the smell. It had an old, musty scent, almost like a library, but with the faint smell of rot mixed in. The second thing I noticed was a large painting in the back of the room. It was a fiery landscape. On the left of the painting was a mound of gold. A throne sat in the middle. There was a demon sitting on the throne. Gold-encrusted horns were protruding from its head, and it wore a veil decorated in jewels. There was nothing particularly scary about the painting, but still, I shuddered from it. We looked around the store for a brief moment. It was filled with odd little trinkets. There were animal bones, spell books, dark fantasy paintings, role-playing dice, and various other seemingly useless items. I was not impressed. We heard footsteps coming from behind a curtain, which was behind the checkout counter. The curtain parted, and out walked an old lady. Her hair was gray and long with a single dreadlock in the front that had a feather and what looked to be small bones woven into it, about the size you might see from a cat. Her face was wrinkled and she had deep brown eyes. Her outfit, though, looked like she had found a gypsy costume at Spirit of Halloween. "Well, hello," the old woman cooed. "What can I help you with?" I was a little put off by her appearance and I forgot to speak. I guess I was expecting something a little more authentic. Luckily, Sawyer shut up.
We're here for some advice. Or guidance, maybe? We have some questions about the supernatural. There was an incident a while back that we wanted your help with.
The woman smiled warmly at us. "Follow me back here." We walked with her back behind the curtain. We passed a few stacks of dusty boxes, and she led us into a room that was also blocked by curtains. The woman parted the curtains and guided us inside. We sat down at a small round table that had a black cloth with a dark red trim that draped over the top. On top of the table was a crystal ball that had a golden, demonic-looking hand at the base. Sawyer shot me a look that said,
"We're gonna waste our money on this old goat?"
I shrugged and cocked my head to the side, saying, "We'll see what happens. I'll pay." The old woman looked at us both slowly. "So, what do you boys want to know?" Sawyer spoke first. He started out slow.
"About a year ago, my friend's brother went missing.
He nodded towards me.
Everyone in our town searched everywhere. 2 months later, we found out that his brother has been murdered."
I quietly relived the moment the police told my parents what happened to Barry. I shuddered. There are some rumors of what happened. People say that he was sacrificed to the devil down there in the tunnels, and that there was an almost scripture-like passage on the wall. A lot of the rumors say that the passage talked heavily about some mammon. I know the Bible talks about mammon, but as well. But people say that the M was capitalized, like it was a name. Do you know what that is? A silent grin crept across the woman's face. Mammon. She said it in a whisper, but with more force behind it than I thought was possible. When she said it, darkness settled in the room. A weight fell on everyone around the table, almost as if a weighted blanket were draped over us. Mammon is one of the 7 demon lords, the lord of greed and wealth. He wants all, and he will take all. Okay, but what did he want with my brother? I leaned forward as I spoke, waiting for the answer like a patient waiting for a diagnosis. One can't say for certain, but I would guess that it wasn't Mammon himself who wanted your brother, but someone who was trying to gain something from Mammon. Sawyer and I both froze, lead building in our stomachs. Tears began to form in my eyes and my voice wavered. What could they gain from murdering my brother? The old woman's eyes flickered. Do you want to find out? Her grin became more prominent. Sawyer and I glanced at each other. So many emotions flashed through me. Sorrow and curiosity, but mostly fear. Looking at the psychic, I whispered, I want to know. The woman put her hands on the crystal ball and let out a breath that sounded like a death rattle. Her body trembled slightly, her eyes fixed on the ball as she muttered some words I couldn't understand. I suddenly felt a presence entering the room. It literally felt as if someone had walked into the room and was standing behind us. I shot a look behind me, but saw nothing. The room was even darker now somehow. I looked over at Sawyer. His eyes were glued to the woman and her crystal ball, tears running down his face. A gurgle escaped the woman's mouth, and she began breathing heavily. Fear had masked her face. She started looking around the room as if she was trying to see something. Then she spoke. Who's there? Her voice was no longer an old woman's voice, and it sounded familiar. Hello? Grayson? Is that you? This isn't funny. Get out of there! I began actively crying. Soft moans escaped from my mouth as tears poured down my face. Barry? The old woman didn't acknowledge me. She suddenly screamed in that same young boy's voice, Barry's voice. Who are you? Grayson? Grayson, help me! No, get away from me! The woman began moving around in her chair as if she were running, her hands still connected to the crystal ball. Her body jolted and she groaned. She began inching like a worm, still seated in her chair, leaning over the table as she craned her neck to look behind herself. Please stop. Don't kill me. Please don't kill me. Then the psychic's head violently shot to the side and she began gurgling and shaking. Without warning, she smashed her head into the table and lay motionless. I was now sobbing uncontrollably. Struggling to get up from my chair, my limbs were too weak and too shaken to get me up. Sawyer saw me struggling. Wiping tears from his eyes, he quickly reached me and helped me to my feet. As my friend helped to lift me up, the old woman sat up in the chair and shot over the table, knocking it over and landing on top of me. Mammon! 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 She screeched in my face over and over. I fought to get her off of me. Sawyer and I were both screaming as we tried to get her off. She pulled a small bone out of her hair and stabbed me in the side with it. As soon as she did, She stopped screaming, got off me, and ran deeper into the store. I felt blood pooling down my side, but I didn't hesitate for a single second. We sprinted out of the store, accidentally knocking over a vase of fake eyeballs on our way out. Sawyer drove us far out of the city and pulled over on the side of the road. I was an absolute emotional wreck, and Sawyer wasn't much better off. My side was now soaked in blood, and I began to feel woozy. That strange feeling of darkness still hadn't left me either. Whatever was in that shop, it was pure evil. I had never felt something like that in my entire life up to that point. Nonetheless, I knew the wound in my side was the first problem that needed to be addressed. "Sawyer, can you drive me to the hospital?" I said, holding my side. Sawyer looked over at me and saw the blood in my hand. He quickly wiped the tears from his face and locked in.
Yeah. I'm fine. I can drive.
We drove to the instant care. Even though I was actively bleeding, we sat in the waiting room for almost 15 minutes before a nurse called us back. I was treated with antibiotics and easily sewn up. We sat in silence in the car as Sawyer took me home. How do you even talk about what happened? As the young men we were, we struggled talking about how we felt for something small and simple, let alone something as traumatic as what we had just experienced. We pulled up to my house as the sun was setting, and Sawyer dropped me and my car off and then walked home. His house was only a block away. I walked into my house, carefully avoiding my parents. I didn't want to explain the blood or my mental state to them. I quietly walked to my room. I carefully laid down on my bed, avoiding my hurt side, and soon I fell asleep, overcome by exhaustion. As quickly as I had fallen asleep, I began to dream. I was in an aspen grove, on a dirt trail. The trail itself was littered with leaves. I looked up, and it was dusk out. As I walked down the trail, there was no sound in the trees. No birds chirping, no crickets singing, nothing. I remembered when I was younger and in a scout group, our leader taught us that when the forest goes silent, danger is near. Remembering this, my senses heightened, and fear began to overwhelm me. I quickened my pace down the trail. Suddenly, the forest around me darkened. I looked up, surprised that nightfall had come so soon. But it hadn't. It was still dusk. A sickening dread fell over me, and I struggled to breathe. I fell on my knees, putting my face in my hands, trying to calm myself by saying a silent prayer. Out of fear, I forced myself awake from my dream. My eyes shot open, struggling to adjust to the darkness. My ears focused first, crickets chirping, and water trickling. As my eyes finally adjusted, I realized I was still outside. I was kneeling in a small stream, my pants were soaked, and my hands were in my lap. It was cold, and it was dark. At first, I thought I was still dreaming, but I had this weird sense of awareness that I knew meant I wasn't. I looked up into the sky and saw stars. It was nighttime. Only the moonlight showed me my surroundings. I looked forward, panic forming behind each breath that I took. I knew I had gone to sleep in my bed. I knew that. But now, I'm kneeling in a stream in the middle of the night, and in front of me stands a fence of rebar. Dread and fear built in my chest as I realized where I was. About 20 yards in front of me is where they found Barry's body. Suddenly, a soft voice sounded through my mind. "Verily, I say unto thee, appeasal of our God in this mortal realm is nigh unto impossible to attain. Yet, through the might and dominion of Mammon, all things shall come to fruition according to his will. Behold, Mammon's wife." As those words echoed through me, fear took over my body and I began to tremble. I scrambled to my feet. I realized I wasn't wearing any shoes, but I didn't care as I ran up the side of the embankment that formed the stream and led out of the tunnel. As I got to the top of the embankment, I looked at my surroundings, lit by the moonlight. Trees and bushes blocked my view. If I was in a calmer state of mind, I could have easily found my way to the road that was only a couple hundred yards away, a road I had driven many times. But in my panic, I bolted in a random direction, trying to free myself from the fear that nipped at every step. A few minutes of running had passed, and eventually the foliage opened into a clearing of downed trees. Beyond the clearing, I could see light coming from a cul-de-sac up ahead. I passed by the houses, still not entirely sure where I was, but I knew if I kept walking down this road, it would eventually lead me back into town. My feet were bloody and covered in thorns and needles, but I didn't dare stop until I made it back home. After about 30 grueling minutes of walking, I finally made it back to my neighborhood. I stumbled into my house, grabbed some tweezers from my bathroom, filled a large pot with warm water, and sat down, putting my feet in the pot so I could get them cleaned. I glanced over at the clock on the stove. It read 2:56 a.m. I spent the next 20 minutes or so picking thorns out of my feet, and then I shuffled back into bed and went to sleep. I was so exhausted. In the morning, I was awoken by my dad coming into my room. "Grayson?" I stirred awake and looked over at him. "Yeah, what's up?" I said groggily. I was still wrapped in the soft trundles of sleep from yesterday's exhausting day and night. "Are you all right? There's a bloody pot in the kitchen and some blood leading to your room." I sat up and winced. My side is still in a lot of pain. "Yeah, sorry about that. I had a late night with Sawyer and I cut my foot open." Before my dad could question me further, I cut him off. "It's not a big deal. I already took care of it. I just had a long night and didn't give much attention to cleaning up." My dad gave me that look that only parents can give, that simply said, "You're not telling me everything." I waved him off, my pain and tiredness urging me to lay back down. "It's fine, Dad. I'll take care of it later." I laid back down, and a few seconds later, my dad walked out of my room, closing the door behind him. I could hear him talking to my mom down the hallway. "Well, is he all right?" my mom asked worriedly. "I mean, I guess he's fine enough. He said that he hurt his foot while he was out with Sawyer last night. He's tired and doesn't want to talk." I could hear a pair of footsteps coming down the hallway towards my room. "Leave him alone, honey. Let him sleep. You can ask him more questions when he wakes up." There was a pause, and then the footsteps retreated away from my door. The rest of what my parents said became muted as I quickly drifted back to sleep. The next time I was woken up by my phone buzzing on my nightstand. I groggily grabbed my phone, rubbing my eyes as I did. Sawyer was calling. "Hey man, what's up?"
Why haven't you been answering your phone? I called you like 6 times.
I pulled my phone away from my face to check my notifications. Sure enough, 6 missed calls from Sawyer. "Sorry man, I didn't sleep well last night." That's when I was reminded of what happened last night, and all the terror and dread flooded back into me.
That sucks, man. I didn't sleep too well either."
Sawyer said. He sounded like he was about to say something else, but I cut him off. "Sawyer, did you..." I couldn't exactly think of how to phrase this without sounding weird. "Did you go anywhere last night?"
What? Why would I? After what happened with that old hag? I didn't even leave my room.
Sawyer sounded almost mournful by the way he said that. I could tell that what happened reopened old wounds for both of us.
Did you go somewhere after I dropped you off?
I paused. "Yeah, I did. But by accident, if you can call it that."
What the hell do you mean by accident? How do you go somewhere by accident?
A hint of irritation was in his voice. "I mean, I think I sleptwalked last night, Sawyer. I left my house without even knowing in the middle of the night. The fear that came with recounting the helplessness I found myself in last night was making me agitated. I dreamt I was walking in an aspen forest, and when I woke up from my dream, I was sitting in front of the sheep's tunnel."
What? You're lying.
"I am not," I shouted. "Listen, I woke up kneeling in a stream that was trickling out of the tunnel." I began to recount what happened to me last night to Sawyer. I don't know what's happening." When Sawyer heard the fear and panic in my voice, his skepticism thawed.
Hey, you okay?
"Honestly, I don't know, but I think I'll be okay." I lied. I don't know if it was more for Sawyer or for myself.
Do you think this all has to do with when you were stabbed?
Sawyer stammered. I froze and began slowly lifting my shirt, trying not to agitate it more. The bandages were discolored around the wound. "I don't know, give me a second." Something didn't look right with the bandages. I put the phone down and walked into my bathroom. I turned towards the mirror and lifted my shirt up again to get a good look at my injury. My bandage was still on, but a grayish-orange liquid was leaking through the gauze. I slowly peeled off the wrap to get a better look. I was frozen with fear and disgust. The area where I was stabbed was no longer sewn closed. The wound was open larger and deeper than it initially had been. Around the stab wound hole itself, the skin was a pus-filled pit. The skin around the hole was gray and blackening, the same way that a bad brown recluse bite might look. My pulse quickened and my breath was coming in quick, shallow bursts. I screamed. My dad drove me to the same instant care that Sawyer and I had been to the day before. He was furious with the staff there, yelling profanities, blaming them for not properly treating my wound, and threatening to sue them for malpractice. To be honest, I was a little embarrassed about his outburst, but was grateful that my dad's intensity was at least forcing the doctors to do more. When the professionals who are supposed to be helping you look at you with confusion and disgust, it's not a very good morale boost. The doctor said that he had never seen a stab wound turn for the worse like it had. He didn't, or more accurately, couldn't give a good reason for what had happened. But he did prescribe some antibiotics and scheduled a surgery to remove the dead and dying tissue. My dad and I drove back home mostly in silence, except for the few times that my dad grumbled out complaints and swears about how useless today's physicians are. When we got back home, I didn't really feel like doing much. I texted Sawyer an update about the doctors, tossed my phone aside, and sat on my couch. I was so tired from all the stress that the last thing I wanted to do was go to sleep again. I decided I'd distract myself by playing some video games instead. A few hours came and went, and darkness began to fill the sky. I had already downed a couple of energy drinks, yet my eyes were still getting heavy. I didn't want to sleep. I was afraid that I would wake up somewhere I shouldn't be, and I just didn't want to feel that sort of fear again. My mind began drifting through the events of yesterday, the psychic, the hospital, and waking up in front of the sheep's tunnel. I must have been lost in thought for a few minutes when I realized I was drifting away to sleep. I quickly fought off the grogginess and got up from my couch to get another energy drink. I walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, bent over to reach in, and grabbed a drink. As I began to slowly close the fridge door, I heard a gasp come from behind me. Adrenaline shot through my body as I spun around. I saw my mom standing in front of me, barefoot, and her feet were red. Before I could understand why, she began crying. "Mom, are you okay?" I began walking towards her to comfort her. I grabbed her by the shoulders and pulled her in for a hug. She continued crying and didn't say a word. "Mom, what's wrong? Talk to me." I pulled her in tighter and closed my eyes as I did. Suddenly, without any warning, I was thrown backwards onto the ground, hitting my head on the way down. My eyes sprung open in shock and pain. My mom was pinning my arms above my head with strength I had never known her to have. We were no longer in the kitchen. I was laying in a dirt path covered in leaves, and we were surrounded by aspen trees. Mom, get off me, you're hurting me," I screamed as I struggled to get out from underneath of her. She kept crying as she reached down into the dirt and grabbed a kitchen knife off the ground. She began slowly cutting her arm that was holding my hands down. Her blood dripped down her arm, some of it falling onto my face, but the majority of it pooling onto my hands and the ground. With each cut, she let out a soft groan of pain. She then looked me in my eyes, speaking for the first time. "You fell asleep. You shouldn't have done that." She then held out the knife, pointed it towards her, and swiftly drove the knife into her throat. Blood began spurting out from her neck, rushing down her chest, staining her clothes red. Panic rushed through her eyes as she struggled to breathe, gurgling on her own blood. I saw my mom fall over onto her side as she slowly stopped struggling. After her body was still, her gurgling slowly withered to a stop. I cautiously sat up, covered in her blood, and I stared at her. My mom's blood pulled out from her throat, covering the ground. Her feet were also covered in blood, even though the blood hadn't reached her feet yet. Tears were streaming down my face. I tried to scream, but no sound came out of my mouth. In this moment of agony, I was left without a voice. I could do nothing to mourn my mother. I just knew I had to leave. I stood up unsteadily and made my way down the path. My mind was foggy and I was unable to think coherently. I continued to walk down the trail until I came along a clearing with a wide creek running down the left side of it. In the middle of the clearing, near the bank of the creek, was a deer flailing on the ground. The same dark, oppressive feeling I had felt at the psychic shop and the sheep's tunnel washed over me, causing me to freeze in my tracks. Cold air buffeted at my face as I stared at the tormented animal, the sounds of its bones cracking as it thrashed on the ground. Then I woke up. It was dark. Too dark to see anything. My eyes were still adjusting. I could feel my knees pressed against the cold, hard ground. The ground was covered in what felt like pebbles and sand. I looked around me and saw a faint light coming from behind me. It took me a second to understand where I was exactly, and when I did, dread filled the depths of my soul. The wind coming through the tunnel again brushed my face. I knew the sheep's tunnel entrance was barred off, making it impossible for people to get inside, but somehow I was wrong. I struggled to my feet, ignoring the pain of walking barefoot on the cold, rock-covered ground. I crossed towards the entrance, towards where the rebar should be. From a distance, because my eyes were still adjusting, it looked as if the rebar gate was still fully intact. As I got closer, however, I could see that 2 of the rebar shafts had been cut out of the gate, making a hole wide enough for a person to fit their body through. As I stood there, my fear-induced brain examining the gate, trying to figure out the best way to contort my body to get back through the hole, I heard heavy shuffling coming from behind me. I spun around and instinctively brought my fist up to defend myself. Even though dawn was beginning to break outside, the light didn't shine far enough in for me to make out who or what was there. "Hello?" I called out, both hoping and not hoping to get a response. I took a step closer to where the shuffling had come from. "Is anyone there?" I didn't hear anything in response, even though now, looking back at it, I'm not sure if the noise was in my head or not. Reluctantly, I turned around, trying to make my way through the bars so I could get out of this nightmarish place. My adrenaline suddenly spiked when I heard a handful of pebbles tossed down the tunnel towards me. I screamed out in fear and panic, violently throwing myself back around to face the threat. "Who's there?" I screamed. But of course, I got no response. After a few minutes of not hearing anything, I figured I could be quick enough to get through the bars before whatever was there came to chase after me. I started squeezing through the bars, trying to be as quiet as possible. My heart was racing, and despite being so cold, I was sweating. I wanted nothing more than to be out of that tunnel and to never come back. I would make certain of it. My head made it through the bars fine, but my chest was wider and I struggled to push and pull my way through. While I was trying to finesse my body through the gap, I could hear the distant sound of bare feet slapping down against the wet concrete as someone sprinted towards me. I began squirming and screaming in fear and anger. I forced my way the rest of the way through the bars, ignoring the pain of my ribs being squeezed. A primal fear tore through me as I felt a hand brush my feet. I ripped my pants and cut my leg, throwing the rest of my body through the gap. Stumbling to my feet, grunting in fearful anger, I spun around to face my tormentor, only to see nothing. I held my ragged breath in order to hear better. Further down in the tunnel, I could hear a soft, ragged cackle drifting away, deeper into the tunnel. It felt as if the whole forest was fidgeting anxiously around me, like it was waiting for me to run helplessly into it so it could engulf me whole. The overwhelming feeling that I was being watched from all directions began drowning my body. I spun around, trying to stop every unseen glance that was being stolen from me. Paranoia was setting in, and I made the split-second decision to once again run headlong into the woods, but this time remembering to run towards the nearest road. As I raced through the trees, I thought I heard pounding footsteps from behind me. I quickly pivoted to face behind me and to see my pursuer, but I saw nothing. I listened and heard nothing. Fear and paranoia had brittled me, making me rash and instinctive. Turning back around towards the road, I whispered a prayer, asking God to guide me. Soon, my feet met asphalt. My speed didn't slow, but I thanked God and continued towards town. I was walking through a neighborhood a few blocks away from my house. Fear still heightened my senses, but the adrenaline had drained from my body, leaving me tired and exhausted. A car pulled up next to me and rolled its window down.
Grayson? Grayson, get over here.
I had to duck a little to see Sawyer calling me over from the driver's seat of his car. Sawyer, what are you doing out here? I said, in tired excitement as I opened the door to get in. I was happy to see him, but Sawyer didn't look so happy.
I came to find you. What are you doing out here, Grayson?
I woke up out here. I was inside the sheep's tunnel. Sawyer shot a look of bewilderment at me as he began driving down the road.
What do you mean, inside?
Someone cut open the rebar blocking the entrance. I was sitting inside of the tunnel and Sawyer cut me off with a shake of his head.
Grayson, do you have any idea what happened at your house?
I looked at him, staring blankly. I was too tired to process anything. What do you mean? Stifling back tears, Sawyer choked out.
Something happened at your house last night. Your dad can explain.
I saw the red and blue flashing lights reflecting off the houses before we even turned the corner. As we did, an ambulance passed us by with its emergency lights turned off. I looked down the street and could see about 3 or 4 other police cars outside my house. My dad was in the driveway talking to one of the officers. Sawyer parked along the sidewalk. We both got out and walked up to my dad. So many thoughts were rushing through my head, especially the dream that I had had. Tears began forming in my eyes as the apprehension of what was about to happen was hitting me. As we got closer to my dad, I could see by the flashing lights of the police cars that his eyes were red from crying, tears staining his face. Sheriff Nelson was the officer he was talking to. He spoke in a hushed tone, and I could only make out the last bit of what he was telling my dad. The sheriff said, "Her feet were covered in her own blood. We're not sure if... We don't have enough evidence to say any foul play was involved, so we're ruling it. When forensics gets back to me with the details, I'll let you know." Suddenly, both fear and sadness washed over my dad's face. Sheriff Nelson leaned in and whispered one last thing into my dad's ear before he backed away and walked back to his cruiser. My dad turned towards us as we got close enough to talk to him. He held out his arms, and I didn't hesitate to go in for the embrace. I held him tight and cried into his shoulder, hoping that if I held him tight enough, that this night would turn out to be a dream, just like all my other nightmares had. In a hushed whisper, my dad said, "Gray, your mom, he trailed off. She killed herself." As his words reached my ears, a wave of ice shivered down my spine. I pulled away and looked at him. "What did you say?" He wiped tears from his eyes. I woke to find that she wasn't in bed, so I searched around the house for her. I found her in your room. She killed herself in your bed. I fell to my knees, clenching my thighs. My head was spinning, and I felt as if someone's hands were squeezing my lungs, halting my breath. The nightmare I had of my mom killing herself was thrashing around in my head. Images of her bleeding out on the floor tore through my brain. My dad cried out in a pained sadness and fell back into a sitting position with his arms around his legs. "We're being punished," he cried. "We're being punished for our sins." I stared at my dad, unsure of what to say. My mind was spiraling out of control. Then I felt Sawyer put his arm around me.
You're not being punished, Mr. Miller. God puts us all through trials, whether we deserve them or not. In a world where you have tribulation, but taketh heart, I have over.
My dad cut Sawyer off. "Don't quote the Bible to me." My dad said it with such a ferocity that neither Sawyer nor I knew what to say. He glared at Sawyer. "You don't know the first thing about what we've done." He got up and stormed inside. We were left bewildered, unable to say anything. Eventually, I told Sawyer to go home. I thanked him for helping as much as he did and for being such a good friend. Reluctantly, Sawyer went home. The police still had my room taped off. Not that I wanted to see the scene that was left in there. About an hour later, the police packed their things and left. I didn't see any body bags, but I assumed that they had taken my mom away. I walked into my room and saw her blood-soaked hair dangling from the side of my bed and the blood that pooled on the ground. I slowly backed out of my room in shock, holding back vomit. My dad was leaning against the wall, watching me. "Close the door," my dad said. "The police don't take the bodies of suicide victims. That's the responsibility of the family." He walked downstairs and down the hall into his room. I stood there with tears running down my face, bile creeping up my throat. I didn't have the strength to make it to a trash can or a toilet, so I leaned against the wall, slid down to the ground, and threw up on the floor. Later that day, in the afternoon, a cleanup crew called Aftermath came and took care of my mom's body and began the cleaning process of my room. They gave me a pamphlet that provides steps on how to best move forward from this. It suggested staying somewhere else while they cleaned up the house and to go to grief counseling. I texted Sawyer and asked him if I could stay at his house for a while. He quickly replied, saying that I could stay as long as I needed to. I knew I could always count on him. Then I texted Father Malcolm. I hadn't spoke to him in over a year, but I knew he was a good man and would be willing to meet with me for free. Father Malcolm texted me back within the hour and told me I could meet with him after his other meetings the very same evening. As I grabbed a sleeping bag from the garage and some of my clothes from the laundry hamper, I heard footsteps in the front room. The front door opened and closed as my dad left. After how cold he had been to Sawyer and I didn't particularly care where he went. I put my things in a duffel bag and drove over to Sawyer's house. Sawyer let me sled up my sleeping bag in his room. He didn't say much, which I was actually grateful for. I didn't really feel much like talking, honestly. Then his parents made us dinner. They treated me with so much love and kindness, it felt as if I would never be able to repay them for their charity. I knew they would always be there for me if I ever needed them. When evening came, Father Malcolm sent me a text saying I could come and meet with him then. The church building that Father Malcolm was at was on the other side of town. Sawyer offered to drive me, and I didn't argue. We were at the church in no time at all. The father was waiting outside for us. I went inside with him while Sawyer waited in the car. Father Malcolm was probably in his early 40s, with dark brown hair and a kind smile. He wore a short-sleeved clergy shirt with dark pants to match. His office wasn't very large, and the walls were simple. A modest white color adorned with pictures of Christ and the Virgin Mary on the walls. Father Malcolm had an L-shaped dark brown desk decorated with a mix of crosses, some prayer beads, his laptop, and a prayer candle in the corner. The scent of the room was a mixture of the candle and his cologne. I can't even begin to express the sadness I'm feeling for you right now. I'm so sorry, Grayson, Father Malcolm said after I told him what happened. I couldn't find the words to respond, so I just gave him a shrug. He looked at me with a sad smile, looked down for a brief moment, and then back up at me. You know, he paused, looking for what to say. Whenever I'm lost and I don't know what to do, I search God's holy words. He picked up the Bible next to him. If I don't have a scripture in mind that I feel like will help, I do what I call the holy flip. Father Malcolm gave me a nervous laugh when he said that. He put his thumb in the middle of the pages and started flipping through, not looking at the Bible. When he stopped, I noticed that he was somewhere in the New Testament. Father Malcolm looked down, found a random section of verses, and began reading. No man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold on to the one and despise the other. Ye cannot serve God and mammon. Therefore I say unto you, take no thought for your life. His voice faded out as my ears began to buzz. Mammon. The word sent a chill down my spine. My head began spinning as all the trauma of the last few days came bubbling to the surface. Tears filled my eyes as my breathing became heavy. I looked up and saw Father Malcolm staring at me, concerned. Grayson, are you okay? He put the Bible down in his lap. Yeah, I'm fine, I said with a shaken breath. You don't need to lie to me, Grayson. I can tell something more than what you came here for is weighing on you. Please, talk to me. Before I knew it, words came spilling out of my mouth. I couldn't help but tell him everything that had been happening over the last few days. It felt good to confide in someone that I saw as a man of God, until I noticed his expression. It was one of fear, as if what I said had terrified him to the very core of his soul. How long have you been having these dreams? Father Malcolm asked. His eyes were fixed on the open Bible in his lap. Since I was stabbed by the psychic, so a few days ago. He flinched, paused, and then began slowly quoting the Bible again. In a dream, in a vision of night, when deep sleep falls on men, while they slumber on their beds, then he opens the ears of men and terrifies them with warnings. I believe that God is warning you with these dreams. Grayson, you need to leave town. Tonight. I hesitated. Why do I need to leave? Where would I even go? Anywhere. Just get out of this place. Out of the state if you can. His voice dropped as he leaned towards me. I could feel his breath on my face. And don't tell anyone. This town has been festering for years. The devil's rot has dug deep. What about my dad? He's not okay. I can't just leave him. Malcolm's expression darkened. Don't tell him. Don't even hint at it. He stopped. His hand clenched the edge of the desk. Just leave and don't tell anyone. And I mean anyone, he said forcefully. I felt a knot tighten in my chest as my phone buzzed in my pocket. Sawyer's name lit up the screen. I held it up. It's Sawyer. He wouldn't call unless it was serious. Malcolm didn't say a word as I answered. He silently crossed himself and got up to close the curtains.
Grayson, your dad is here looking for you. I don't know how he knows we're here, but he looks really pissed. He went in through the back door. I think we should go.
Sawyer sounded worried. Anxiety began filling my stomach. Yeah, okay, I'll be right out. I hung up. What did he say? Father Malcolm asked. He said my dad's here. I've got to go. I got up and left his office. As I opened the front door of the office, I heard a gun cock behind me. I froze, slowly turning around to see my dad holding a pistol, pointing it at me. Dad, what are you doing? My dad's face was covered in anger and tears. The sheriff called Grayson. He said the forensics came back. Your fingerprints were found on your mother. Your fingerprints were found on the knife that killed her. I backed out the door. What are you talking about? I wasn't even in the house when she died. You know I would never kill Mom. My father took a few quick steps towards me and shoved me hard, sending me sprawling out onto the front steps. From the ground, I looked up to see my dad fire 3 rounds into the father's office. He then turned back to me. You weren't in the house? Oh, so the sheriff just lied to me then. He flipped me over on my back, grabbing me by my shirt and pressing the pistol against my forehead. You killed my wife, you whore to the demon. You ruined everything for me. The gifts we were going to receive if you hadn't killed her. She was never supposed to die. Dad, I screamed through tears. I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't kill Mom, I promise. My crying was uncontrollable. My dad looked at me as if he were about to break down, and then his face went cold. I'm going to blow your brains out and end this. If your mom and I can't receive our blessings, then none of them can. He pressed the muzzle of the gun harder into my forehead. I closed my eyes, waiting for the end. I didn't feel any pain until something heavy collided with my nose. My eyes shot open and my hand instinctively went to cover my nose, but it was blocked by whatever hit me. I opened my eyes and saw my dad slumped over on top of me. His head is what had collided with mine. I realized I was covered in blood. Was it mine? No, nothing but my nose was in pain, and it didn't feel like it was bleeding. I crawled out from underneath my dad and saw where the blood was coming from. It was pooling out of his head. Bile rose up my throat as I sat there looking at my dad's body. At first I thought my dad shot himself, until I realized someone else was standing a few yards back. It was Sheriff Nelson. He shot my dad before my dad could shoot me. Without saying anything or acknowledging me whatsoever, the sheriff stormed over to my dad and kicked his lifeless body, rolling it over. Then he kneeled down, lifted his head by the hair, and began beating him with the butt of the pistol. I stood there in horror of the brutality.
Grayson!
Sawyer yelled and snapped me out of it. I didn't hesitate. I sprinted off the grass and towards the car. I looked back and saw Sheriff Nelson pointing his gun towards me and the car, but his gun never went off. Sawyer sped off before I even had my door closed.
Oh my god. What happened out there?
Sawyer said as I fought the urge to vomit. My mind was racing and my face was full of tears. I don't know. We just need to get out of here. We gotta pack our bags and... An excruciating burning sensation shot through my side, right where I had been stabbed. I screamed out in pain. It caused Sawyer to swerve.
What? What is it?
He tried looking over at me while still paying attention to the road. My side! Fuck! Dude, it hurts so much! I began sobbing from the trauma and the pain. I lifted up my shirt to see what was wrong. Bad call. All the blood drained from my body as I saw a single eyeball protruding from my side. I stared in horror at the eye, and then I looked over at Sawyer. He was also staring at the eye, and then vomited all over himself. I heard us hit the rumble strips, and then the dirt. I looked out the windshield of the car as it flipped. When the roof of the car impacted with the ground, everything went dark. Then, I heard the sound of running water. When I opened my eyes, I was back in the forest. The deer was still in the clearing, still thrashing. The running water from the stream and the cracking of the deer's bones filled my ears. My ears were ringing and my head was pounding. A fear so overwhelming and powerful overtook me. I was frozen in place. No matter how hard I tried to move my body, no matter how hard I tried to escape, I couldn't run away from it. I felt like the only way I could escape this fear was to kill myself, to just end it all. But another thought came to me. I remembered in the Bible, Jesus often cast out demons, and demons were cast out by the use of his name. So I tried to kneel, I tried to speak, to call upon my God to save me, but I couldn't move and I couldn't speak. My body was ensnared in darkness, and my voice was strangled by evil. When my body finally moved, it wasn't me who was controlling its movements. My body didn't move on its own. I felt something move my body, as if I were a marionette puppet on strings. My body lurched forward unnaturally as I was forced towards the deer. I stood inches away from the deer and I began to tremble. Slowly, my trembling turned into violent shaking. My eyes shot open and I was being shaken by someone. The air was damp and cold. I could tell I was in the tunnels. I looked up and I saw Sawyer. He was illuminated by a flashlight he was holding, shaking me and yelling my name. When he saw I was awake, he broke down crying. What are we doing here? I said as I began to tremble from the fear and the cold. Through tears and shaken breath, Sawyer said,
After the car rolled, you scrambled out of the window. I tried talking to you, tried getting you to calm down, but you wouldn't listen to me. You got out of the car and started running. You were bleeding so bad.
Sawyer caught his breath, and then he continued.
I followed you here. I caught up to you as you were squeezing through the rebar, but as soon as I called out to you, you took off in a sprint and I lost track of you. It took me so long to find you,
he said, wiping tears and snot from his face. Suddenly, an intense, sharp pain shot through my side again. My breathing began to become labored, and my vision started to become blurry as I started to sweat profusely. I began to lose balance and fell towards the ground. The last thing I saw before my head made contact with the concrete was Sawyer, trying to catch me as I fell. As soon as my vision went black, I woke up in the grove again, kneeling in front of that deer. The deer's head sat upright and was completely still. Its twisted, mutilated body began convulsing, making a sound similar to a shoulder popping out of the cartilage around the joint. There was a massive bulge in its side, and despite its convulsions, its head remained unmoving. A sound began to be produced from the mouth of the deer. It was a voice that was being forced through vocal cords in a mouth of an animal that was never meant to produce words. It took a second for a true voice to form, but when it did, it said, "By the power of Mammon, by the power of Mammon, by the power of Mammon, all things shall come to fruition according to my will. Finish thou the washing of the feet of mine offerings. Make them clean unto me as thou hast done to the sacrifices before." The deer's torso stopped convulsing, yet its legs were still flailing. The bones were practically jelly from being cracked against the ground so violently. I looked down and realized I had a knife in my hand. Once again, as if a puppet on strings, I began making an incision into the bulge of the deer's flank. With little difficulty, the knife penetrated the skin of the deer. When it did, pus and gas escaped out from where the knife had plunged. Undeterred, I began sliding the blade effortlessly through its skin, as if the skin were made of paper. Immediately, after making the incision, something began inching out of the hole. I quickly realized it was fingers creeping out of the deer, slowly revealing an entire arm up to the mid-bicep. The arm seemed to be that of a man, yet it was small and sickly. Even though it was covered in blood and pus, I could tell its skin was pale, as if it hadn't seen sunlight for its entire existence. I slowly reached out my own hand, this time on my own volition, so that I could intertwine my fingertips with its own. When our hands were laced, I woke up. I was back in the tunnels, and I was on my knees. I looked down at my hands, and they were covered in blood, and I was bathing someone's feet in that blood. A knife lay on the floor next to me. It took me a second to comprehend what was happening, what I had done. Before me lay a body. I could tell it was bound to the floor by rope tied to anchor points. The body's stomach was cut open, its organs spilling out onto the floor. My heart began to pound. My mouth was dry. I had just killed this person. I slowly looked up to face my victim, and my heart dropped. I could feel my stomach begin to twist in anguish, and my temperature began to rise. The body that was in front of me was not a stranger, like I had thought. It was Sawyer. His lifeless body, covered in blood. His face was still twisted in agony. Tears began to fill my eyes, and my lips began to tremble. I dropped to his feet and crawled towards my friend. My breathing quickened, and I began mumbling incoherently as I began to sob. My hands shot up, grabbing and scratching at my chest. I was in complete panic, not knowing what to do. Suddenly, I felt two hands grab my shoulders from behind. I shot forward, tumbling over Sawyer's body. I was sobbing uncontrollably as I looked up at who had touched me. In the dim light coming through the grate overhead, I could make out a small, worn-down body dressed in a cheap gypsy costume. And from that woman rumbled out a voice. She chanted, "Rise, Mammon's chosen. Rise, he who was prepared by his parentum. Rise, wife of avarice." Hands emerged from the shadows around me and lifted me by the small of my back into the air. "The wife of avarice has cleansed the last of your sacrifices. O Lord Mammon, your bride is now prepared for you." I was unable to move my body, unable to cry anymore, and unable to speak. A pale hand reached out from the darkness above me and gingerly lifted my shirt. The hand traced its fingers down my chest, eventually reaching my side. It slowly plucked the eyeball from my wound and fed it into my mouth. As the eyeball slid its way down my throat and rested in my stomach, darkness filled my body. I was then gently laid back onto the cold, concrete floor next to Sawyer. The marriage has now been set. Bless us with our fortune, O Lord Mammon. The psychic then slowly disappeared into the shadows, leaving me alone with Sawyer's body. For what felt like hours, I laid on the ground, slowly soaking in Sawyer's blood. My body had no strength left to move. Eventually, I was able to find the ability to get up and leave the tunnels. I don't remember how I got there, but I made my way to the sheriff's station. I told them that I had killed Sawyer. I told them that I might have killed other people. I told them that I had been possessed. They didn't believe the possession, and they arrested me immediately. I was held in jail for a few nights. The investigators came and interrogated me, and I left nothing out. I told them everything from visiting the psychic to what happened to me and Sawyer in the tunnels, though I kept hoping. I knew that no one would believe me. I mean, how could they? A few months came and went. Eventually, my court date arrived. My lawyer didn't believe in the possession, so he decided we'd claim insanity. As the plaintiff gave his argument and displayed the facts, I could feel the court turn against me. They pulled up pictures of what happened to Sawyer, my mom, and Barry. I could see my lawyer's confidence in winning fall even further and further away. My lawyer went up and began defending me. He didn't have much, essentially just my word of what happened and the dreams I had been having. My lawyer did, however, bring up my experience at the psychic's. He pulled up the footage of me and Sawyer pulling into the plaza. But there were no cameras pointing towards Miss Celia's Dark Arts Emporium, so we were never actually shown going in. The court proceedings went on for another 2 days before the jury finally came back with a verdict. We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty by reason of insanity. The entire courtroom burst out in infuriation. My lawyer looked over at me in disbelief. The judge tried to quiet the room, but to no avail. Shouting over the crowd, he ordered that I'd be taken to a state-run psychiatric facility. As the officers escorted me out of the courthouse to be transported, I could hear the crowd of people outside shouting and screaming. It sounded as if the whole town were here to condemn me. As I crossed the threshold of the courthouse, the first people that I met the gaze of were Sawyer's parents. I could feel the hate coming from their eyes burning into my skin. I saw Sawyer's dad, his anger boiling up when he suddenly screamed, "I'll kill you, you whore of the devil." He drew a pistol from his waistband and shot at me. People screamed and ran while the police pushed me to the ground. 2 of them opened fire. I was quickly ushered into a police cruiser waiting just past the crowd. Before I was pushed into the back seat, I looked back and saw Sawyer's dad laying in a puddle of blood, unmoving. For the past 7 years, I've been living in some psychiatric center in the middle of nowhere that I haven't really cared to know the name of. I've been through countless treatments in order to fix me, after years of being told that I'm sick and that there's something wrong with me. I have a hard time deciding whether or not I really am crazy. Part of me knows that it was some sort of possession or a demonic influence, but I'm even starting to doubt myself. The center itself tries hard to make the stay more welcoming. Even though the hallways in almost every room smells of latex and cleaning chemicals, they attempt to mask the depressive atmosphere with lavender air freshener and a colorful display of artwork on most of the walls. I guess they thought that staring at pictures of rainbows made downing 20 pills a day a little more pleasant. Life here is dull. It's always the same routine. I guess for the more clinically insane patients, the routine helps. We wake up, eat breakfast, have quiet time, recess, physical activity, lunch, TV time, individual therapy, and then group therapy. It never changes. I've made a few friends, including one of the security guards named Sam. We've been friends for the past 4 years, which has been good, especially because he lets me get away with things that I shouldn't, like getting to stay out a little later than curfew, sneaking me movies that aren't approved here, and a few other things. Mostly though, I enjoy being able to talk to Sam. He's a bit overweight, but he's a good listener, and is one of the few people here that don't think I'm completely insane. I've also been meeting with a new therapist and psychiatrist. He was assigned to me because he also has a religious background. He's talked me through a lot of what happened and has never made me feel crazy. In order to help with my therapy, he told me to write down my experience and share it with others, which is what this has been. My therapist has always made me feel safe and welcome, until recently. I was walking out of our most recent session, about to be escorted back to my room by Sam, when my therapist stopped me on my way out. "You know he loves you, right?" I stopped and turned back towards him. "Yeah, I know. God loves me." My therapist shook his head and smiled. "He's waiting for you. He's delighted in his anticipation to see you again." Confusion and a sense of dread filled my body. At the time, I figured he was just saying some strange words of comfort, but after what happened tonight, I know what he truly meant. That night when I laid in bed, the same sense of dread filled my entire soul. I couldn't sleep. My mind kept wandering back to when everything happened. I hated thinking about what happened, so I got up and knocked on my door. Sam's office was on the other side of the hallway. Sometimes he talked to me at night when I couldn't sleep. "Hey, Sam, you there?" I heard shuffling as he threw his weight around to get up, and he came up to the door. "What's up, Grayson?" he huffed. "I can't sleep. I figured a walk to the bathroom would help get my mind off things." I heard his keys jingle. "Yeah, just a sec." He opened the door and let me out. "You want me to walk with you?" "No, I'll be fine. Thanks, though." The hallway was illuminated by the light from Sam's office. Just down the hall and through a door on the right was the bathroom. It wasn't very far from my room. I walked in and sat on the toilet. After I was finished, I washed my hands and stared at my reflection in the mirror. My face had changed a lot in the past years. I was barely recognizable. Thoughts of my parents, my brother, and Sawyer came barreling through my head. I let them come in, accepted them, and tried to let the thoughts pass. But they wouldn't. I stood there for a few more minutes, but the memory still wouldn't leave. I needed to talk to someone. I walked back down the hallway to find Sam, but he wasn't in his office. I called out for him, but I got no response. Figuring he went on his nightly rounds, I started towards my room. I noticed immediately that my door had been left ajar. The light from the office shone into my room and bathed the scene before me. My brain stalled, trying to register what I was seeing. At first, I thought Sam was standing on something against my wall, stretching his arms above his head. But I soon realized he wasn't standing on anything. His body had been pinned to the wall by massive nails. Sam's arms were stretched over his head, also pinned with nails. His legs were in the mirror opposite. His head dangled from his neck, being held on by strands of skin. A massive opening was cut from his collarbone down to his groin. His guts were spilling out on the floor. The flesh of his stomach was also pinned to the walls. Sam looked as if he were a frog being dissected in a high school science class. Suddenly, the dread left my body, and a euphoric feeling began filling me. It started at my side and slowly spread across the whole of me. There was no thought in my mind, yet I acted. I slowly approached Sam, crawled in, and curled up inside the chasm of his body. I closed my eyes and let out a sigh. Whether I chose this or not, I felt at peace here. The jubilation of the bridegroom. And it came to pass in the fullness of days that the voice of the beloved was heard from the depths, crying unto his chosen, saying, My chosen, the hour is come that we should be one. The covenant has made it sure, and our union is sealed. Come thou hither, and enter into the place prepared, for I have hewn thee a chamber in the belly of the man, and there thou shalt find rest. Lay thyself in these boughs, and be not afraid, for as the worm feedeth upon the husk, so shall eternity feed upon thee, and thou shalt not be consumed. Bind thy soul unto mine, and let no shadow divide us, for I am thine, and thou art mine, from everlasting to everlasting. And the beloved stretched forth his hand, and lo, it was as a flame that devoured the night, yet it burned not. Then spake the chosen, grasping the hand of the beloved, saying, Ye, O Lord Mammon, I come. Though the earth open her mouth, and the pit groaneth, I shall not fear, for thy love is stronger than death. And they descend together, and the darkness received them, as a womb receiveth the seed, and there was silence in the deep. Thus the marriage was consummated, in the place where light goeth not, and the two were one spirit. And it is written, Whom the depths hath joined together, let not the heavens put asunder. Thank you for spending this eerie time with me tonight. If you enjoyed tonight's story, by all means, like, subscribe, and join the growing circle of nightmares and ghouls and all of the monsters in between. Let me know in the comments what you thought of tonight's story, and tell me, would you go into those tunnels alone? Or do you think you could make it out alive? The author of tonight's story, Jazzyclams, is linked below. Please stop in and show them your support and explore more of their work. And a special thank you to Ken for letting me use his voice to bring to life Sawyer. Okay, so I know it's been a while since my last video. Once again, my day life took over more time than I could handle. Since getting married, I moved my family to a new state, got a new job, and finished my bachelor's degree. Now that I have all of those big goals accomplished, I'm excited to continue on my next big goal, which is to be growing with all of you ghouls. I'm excited to be back. Until next time, keep the lights low, keep your mind open, and be careful what names you whisper in the dark. You never know who or what could be listening. Sleep well, if you can, and as always, stay spooky.